Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community, is brought to you by Handi Quilter, designed by a quilter for quilters. Sulky, express yourself with Sulky and create with confidence. Brother, it's so easy with Brother at your side. And Quilt Cut, easy fabric cutting for quilters. Hi, and welcome to Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community. I'm Mary Kate Carr-Petras, and today with me is Kimmy Brunner, who is a two-time International Machine Quilting Teacher of the Year and a Handi Quilter Ambassador. And today, Kimmy is here to talk to us about the advantages of quilting with templates. And she is all set up. So welcome, Kimmy. Thanks for coming here.
Thank you, Mary Kate. I'm pleased to be here.
It's great. So let's start off. Tell us what's in it for us to work with templates when we're quilting?
You know, templates kind of bridge that gap between freehand work and computerized quilting. For the quilter who either can't afford a computerized system or just doesn't wish to buy a computerized system, templates provide kind of a skeleton or a set of bones for your quilt that can smooth the rough edges of your freehand work and kind of tie everything together and make it look just a little bit more perfect, so you can achieve some of the perfection of computerized work while still doing freehand work and creating the entire quilt yourself without pushing a button and letting a computer do it for you.
And that's great, because I think some of us, we go to these, quilting shows and we see this gorgeous machine quilting, and if we haven't done this before, we wonder, how did they get that perfection? And I think sometimes we think, oh, it's all done with the push of a button.
Yeah, push a button and go eat some bonbons and ta-da, you get a quilt when you're done.
It doesn't sound so bad, but there's a lot of fun to be had with doing the quilting yourself, which I think we both enjoy.
Yes.
Different levels of expertise, definitely. But well, let's talk about the templates that you brought to work with today. So these templates are ones that you make, correct?
Yep, they are my own templates. People always want to know, what am I looking for when I go out to shop for templates? There are templates that have no markings at all, templates that just have a couple of easy markings, and templates that are marked with every single line that you could possibly imagine. The more markings, the more expensive the template. So people always want to know, really, do I have to spend all the money and buy all those marks? And I'm here to tell you, you can save some money by buying a template that really only has a couple of crosshair marks, which you always want to have. You always want crosshairs because that's how you line your template up in the center of your block. But if you want more marks than you have, you can just buy a plain template, use one of these little slide rules. You know, we used to use those before quilting took over our lives, when we used to still sew. You can place your little marker and use a Sharpie permanent marker, and I use an extra fine tip because you want a little tiny mark, nothing big. You can create the marks that you are going to need for this quilt. You just mark up that template, use those marks to help you line up exactly where you want your stitching line to go. When you're done with this quilt, you just use some rubbing alcohol and a cotton ball, and you whisk those marks away.
That's great.
And the template's ready for you to remark for the next quilt. So you don't
Really
necessarily,
versatile.
very versatile, and you don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money on marks that may or may not be useful to you. So spend as little money as you can and make your markings yourself.
But you don't want to make your templates out of template plastic for this
Absolutely
application, because
not.
you would stitch right through them probably.
Yep, if you are going to be quilting with a long arm or a mid arm machine, you need to have a template that is thick enough that your hopping foot won't hop over, break your needle, knock your machine's timing out. My templates are all 1/4 of an inch, really sturdy, heavy-duty acrylic. So if you nick the edge of it, the whole thing's not going to shatter and be wrecked. If you are a domestic machine quilter, though, and you aren't going to be using the templates while you're stitching, you can use anything. You can use the lid of a jar and lay it down on your quilt, mark around that template with chalk, and then just come in and stitch right along your chalked markings. You get the same finished result. You're just using a slightly different procedure to get there.
But again, for a domestic, if you're using just a domestic machine, these templates would be helpful too, because you can mark them. So you get that advantage, which you don't have if you're using the lid of a jar, for instance. So those are great. Well, speaking of markings, so how do we mark the quilt top itself?
This little sample started out as just a plain piece of black fabric, and I wanted to dress it up using color. I like using I'm such a little thread slut. I go to the thread booth and I buy whatever shiny, bright colored thread that they have. I wanted to create my borders using thread rather than using piecing. So I started by just chalking some markings so I could use some nice bright blue thread and create kind of a little tiny stop border. And then I wanted to create these curvy diamond shapes all around the border, so I just put some markings to help me guide my template so that I would get consistently sized and shaped curvy diamonds across the entire length and width of the border. I mark what I need to mark to end up with a crisp and professional finish. I don't like having to rip my stitches out, so I want
Really?
those stitches
How
to
odd.
be, yeah, because everybody loves
Right.
ripping so much. So I use one of these little mechanical chalk pencils. It's just like a regular mechanical pencil. You push the button and the chalk comes out. And I just placed marks where I want the top and bottom of my diamonds to be. And I placed marks where I wanted my diamonds to intersect with one another. If I just stitch from marking to marking, and my markings are correct, my quilted motifs will be exactly where I want them to be each and every time. So do a little bit of pre-marking and you will end up much happier with your finished results.
Okay.
So let me show you how to stitch it out.
Please, please.
I'm just going to start in the corner, and I will tie this first curvy diamond into the diamond shape that I already stitched in my corner. And because I'm using a brightly contrasting thread, lime green thread on black fabric, I'm going to hand tie my starts and stops because it'll just look nicer than a little pile of tiny little stitches at the beginning of my stitching line. I'm just going to lay down my template and start stitching. From one chalk mark, whoops, to the next. I'm going to stop with my needle down so that my machine doesn't roll and drift. And instead of stitching down and up, I'm going to stitch down, up, and down so that all of my stitching lines cross over where my diamonds join one another. If I just go down, up, I run the risk of leaving a gap in between. And I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to stitch up, stop with my needle down, shift my template, line it up, and stitch down and back up.
And I notice you're leaving about a 1/4 inch or however wide your...
It's easy from your starting point. Our hopping foot gives us a 1/4 inch spacing between where the edge of the template lies and where our needle is going to stitch. Lining up the starting point is easy because my needle's down, my hopping foot's right there. I just bang the template up against it. But I have to look at where I want to end. Where's my destination? And I want my template to be a 1/4 inch away from that destination. If you're a quilter, you're really good at eyeballing a 1/4 inch. You still may have to kind of shift and fudge your template just a little bit as you move along. But like I said, if you can stitch, if you can piece a quilt, you can figure out where a 1/4 inch is. I'm going to tie this in with my other corner, and then I'm just going to come back, cross my lines. It's as easy as that.
It's so beautiful, that line.
And see how easy it is? Nobody threw up, nobody cried. It works really, really well. We're just going to stop and pivot. And this is what I mean about crossing those lines. I'm closing that little gap each and every time. Working my way back. Stop with my needle down. Swing right back up. And I'm almost done. You're never in a hurry when you're stitching around templates. You do not get a blue ribbon for getting to your destination fastest. You want to always go slowly and carefully.
That's just so great to hear, because I think sometimes if we are not familiar with machine quilting, you think it's just pedal to the metal all the time.
Yeah, and absolutely, you never want to be pedal to the metal when you are stitching with templates, because pedal to the metal is like a recipe for disaster. And again, because I'm going to tie off my stitching lines, I'm going to leave a nice long tail. And now you can see I've just got nice little curvy diamonds that are all perfectly sized and spaced, right where I want them to be.
For somebody who that's good enough, that would be good enough. You're not one of those people, though.
No, empty space is an evil thing. You should fill it up.
So tell us how you got those lines.
The straight lines?
Side border.
Oh, those are so easy. I want all of my lines to intersect my diamonds perfectly, and I want them to be perfectly straight. So I'm going to give myself some guidelines. Here and here. They're perfectly straight. They're going to keep me on track. So I might mess up a little bit between here and here, but really how much can you mess up in that little space? So I'm going to start. I'll start by stitching the outside ones. Because I don't want to have to do a whole lot of backtracking and traveling, let me show you an easy trick. Once again, I'm lining up my template so that it's a 1/4 inch away. Let me line it up on this side so we can see it more easily. And because I don't want to stitch down and then backtrack what I've stitched to stitch up again, I'm going to cheat my way through it. I'm going to stitch in, and without shifting my template, I'm just going to stitch right back out.
Okay.
And then I'm going to scoot over a 1/2 inch because this template has numerous lines. I've got lines at 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, all the way across the width of the template. I'm just going to line up the
right there.
1/4 inch line on the line I just stitched. Bring my hopping foot over, because that's going to give me a 1/2 inch.
Okay.
I'm going to stitch in, pivot, right back out. And by continuing to do that all the way across, I've got perfectly spaced 1/2 inch lines without ever having to do any backtracking.
And the backtracking that you do is just right on top of the line you originally quilted. It's beautiful. So again, some people that might be good enough, but you may not be one of those people.
I'm not one of those people.
So tell us again. So we have this side border that has some of that lovely negative space, but then you also have some more over here.
I do. I really like floating freehand designs in my negative space. As I said earlier, the perfection of the template smooths the rough edges of your freehand work and makes it look better than it actually is. So I came along with this really bright orchid thread, and I dropped it right in here, just little freehand flowers in each one of my negative spaces. On this side, they're still empty, so you can see how much pop and definition that gives to your quilt. So it's the choice is yours. You can quilt as much or as little as you want, and because you use templates and each shape, each curve, each line is exactly the same, it's going to look much more perfect than it really is.
That's great. Now you teach this technique all over the country.
I do. In fact, I just got back from South Africa not too long ago teaching them how to use templates.
Wow.
So quilters are quilters no matter where you go. So, and I do have a class coming out on Craftsy that is almost 6 hours of template.
Great.
It's just nothing but templates. So
because there's a lot more to the story than just what we're able to show today.
Oh, absolutely. As you can see by some of the quilts behind me, I get carried away with templates.
It's beautiful, beautiful work. Thank you so much for coming today and showing us this and giving us an introduction to templates. We hope that you enjoyed this and that you'll find some courage to go out and start some of your quilting with templates too. Thanks for joining us. Take care. Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community, is brought to you by Handi Quilter, designed by a quilter for quilters. Sulky, express yourself with Sulky and create with confidence. Brother, it's so easy with Brother at your side. And Quilt Cut, easy fabric cutting for quilters.